Hi, welcome to Oneness. Today is day 9 and we will be looking at verse 9 from Tao Te Ching. So as usual, let's observe a few seconds of silence. Thank you. So now let's look at verse 9 from Tao Te Ching. Better stop short than fill to the brim. Oversharpen the blade and the edge will soon blunt. Amass a store of gold and jade and no one can protect it. Climb wealth and titles and disaster will follow. Retire when the work is done. This is the way of heaven. So let's allow a few seconds to sink in with this verse. So, in verse 9, Lord Su clearly talks about the way of minimalistic living. Or he talks about how we should differentiate between the need and want, not obsessively go behind everything. And not the constant pursuit of more and more. Instead, live with enough is enough. Live with what we need. So that way, we'll be much more fulfilled. So now let's get into each line of this verse and try to understand what Lord Su would have meant in each line. So the first line is, better stop short than fill to the brim. So we all clearly know that when the cup is filled with water, until the brim is still fine, but still it overflows. So it is the same thing applies to knowledge as well. And the first line somehow reminded me of a story. So once there lived a Zen master. So he was well respected and people traveled miles and miles just to visit him to know the path to enlightenment and wisdom. So once there was a scholar. So he also decided to visit the Zen master and to intellectually understand what is this enlightenment and wisdom means, or what is the way of Zen. So he visited the Zen master and asked him, can you now tell me more about the way of Zen? So the Zen master patiently started telling him about the way of Zen. But then the scholar, who's already filled with his own ideas and thoughts, he was interrupting the Zen master quite frequently by his sharing, oh, that means this. Then he talks about his own examples. Over a period of time, the Zen master decided, okay, let's stop the session here and let's have a tea. So both the scholar and Zen master sat for a cup of tea. And the Zen master was pouring a tea to the scholar. So the cup first filled and then it starts overflowing. Then it overflowed into the table, then to the floor. And finally, the tea just started touching the feet of the scholar. And that's when the scholar shouted, Master, what are you doing? The cup is already full and then you're still filling the cup. Stop pouring the tea. And that's when the Zen master quietly looked into the scholar's eyes and said, likewise, first empty your mind and come back. So that way you will know the way of Zen. So this story talks about few very important lessons. The first one is, you cannot learn anything if you think you already know everything. And the second one, first we need to open the mind before we open our mouth. And the third important thing is there is two different types of journey. One is intellectual journey, another one is intuitive journey. Most often we go on an intellectual quest to gather information and knowledge more and more. That's why we read book after book and we attend programs after program. We go on a quest to learn more and more. That way we disconnect from our intuitive self. This applies even for the spiritual journey. No matter how many workshops and books that we read on spiritual journey, ultimately the journey is ours to take. So we forget that and then we go on the quest to know more and more and more and intellectualize even spirituality. So that's how I connect with the first word. So we need to empty the cup before we can get filled. So with that, let's go to the next line. Oversharpen the blade and the edge will soon blunt. What does it mean? It clearly means that in a quest that I wanted a very sharpest blade so that we keep hitting it after hitting it, the blade becomes so thin that it cannot serve the purpose. It will just merely break. So that's why we should never over sharpen the blade also. And the third line. Amass a store of gold and jade and no one can protect it. What does it mean? It simply means when we go and fill gold and jade in excess and excess of amount, what happens? Even doesn't matter how many security people that we put. Maybe even the security guard himself will get tempted to steal because he may think that, oh, that is so much gold and jade and who is going to notice even if I sneak in few of the gold and jade. So that way, no one can protect the gold and jade if we accumulate in excess. And the fourth line, climb wealth and titles and disaster will follow. This verse clearly talks about competition. When we become more hungry towards more power, more wealth, more prestige, more of everything, what happens is that creates a competition with someone else. And what happens? The other person also wants to compete with us. And then in the quest, he will do all the means what he can to bring us down. So that is what he means. If we constantly pursue the wealth and titles, the disaster will follow. And that's where we stick to what we need instead of what we want and not be power hungry or hungry for wealth, etc. Be content, be minimalist. Then it goes like this. Retire when the work is done. So I see this verse or this line in two ways. The first one is we should retire ourselves from the work to first enjoy the benefit of the work which we already done or which we already complete. Instead, there is no point working again and again and again. It is just going to be stressful. And second, if we don't retire, if we don't take a break, it is just going to increase the stress in our life. And the final line goes like, this is the way of heaven. Of course, the heaven talks about not ever creating. Instead, we should also know when to stop, when to say enough is enough. So that brings to the end of the verse 9. And I like to share a few more examples for this. The first example I like to share is about the human body itself. Our human body got all the intelligence it needs to create the unlimited cells that it ever wants to. However, it also knows when to destroy the cells. If you need to know, there are 300 million cells dies every single minute. 300 million cells. Imagine that. And what happens if the cell doesn't die? If you ask that question, all you will know is, if it doesn't die, that is what the anomaly that we call it as cancer. That is what an anomaly of growth of cells which are supposed to die. Instead, they become an abnormal cell and form as a tumor. And that we call it as a cancer, which can be deadly to our body. So with that, we know that. So why we should not keep on going in a pursuit of gathering wealth and money and prestige and everything in excess. Instead, we should also know how to let go of things. With that, let's come to the actionable thought for today. The actionable thought for today is practice to let go. And what I mean by that, let me give you an example. Whenever my son wants a toy, the new ones, all I ask him to do is take one of his old one, which he no more uses it, or he wants to let go of it. And then only he can buy a new toy. The old toy he can give to someone else. Likewise, the same thing goes to even buying clothes. He has to identify the old clothes which he is ready to let go before he buys new clothes. So that way, he knows the importance of letting go in an early age. So likewise, as the day go by, look around in your house. And think of the things that you're ready to let go of. It can be your old gadgets, it can be your old clothes, or it can be anything that you're no more in use to you. Decide to let go. Just practice that, and you will know how to align yourself with the way of Tao, with sticking to just what we need rather than accumulating in excess and just cluttering everywhere and everything. And that is a way of Tao. And with that, we'll come to an end of verse 9. Thank you so much.